All right, we're here back again. What's going on, everyone? Thanks for tuning in. I'm Jay from Spro Coffee, and we are here talking another morning about coffee Q&A. Whatever questions that you have about coffee, let me know in the comments below. Be happy to answer them for you. If you had me catching this on the replay, thank you very much for tuning in. Appreciate you spending time with us. If you do have questions about coffee, feel free to leave those in the comments, and we'll get to them on the next episode, right? Okay, so let's get into it. First, we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit more about coffee because, well, that's what we do here. We talk about coffee, and we're quite excited about it. So today, I was a little bit discombobulated this morning. I had to go to, I was trying to get, I'm working on we're doing renovations here at the roastery. So there's a lot going on, and I need to pick up some material. So I went to Home Depot before I came here, and, well, you know, you go to Home Depot and you get kind of distracted and taken away, and suddenly, 45 minutes have gone by and you're like, oh my gosh, I got to get back. So I had to rush back here and just trying to catch up a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to do some, we usually at the beginning of the show, we always talk about different coffees as well as brewing methods. But today I thought we'd share with you a little bit about cupping, because the next vlog that comes out Saturday or Sunday is about cupping and tasting these Brazilian coffees, and I have some of them here. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit about cupping. And so first of all, what is cupping? Cupping is a formalized and critical way of tasting coffee. So it's pretty much standardized more or less throughout the industry. And there's different protocols that everyone follows to ensure even and consistent results across the board. So basically, when you're talking with someone that actually is following the protocols for cupping, and you're talking about a particular coffee, there's a common language, a common approach to doing this, so that you can have some idea and some relative sense of confidence that what you're talking about is apples to apples rather than apples to oranges. Right, meaning that, and we also have a scoring system, right? So the basic scoring system is 0 to 100, and there's a scoring sheet. And a lot of times you'll see coffee buyers and coffee professionals. They're talking about coffees, and they're like, "Well, how was that coffee?" Well, probably about an 82, 83. Good, solid, especially coffee. 85, 87. Ooh, even very nice. 87 and above. Ooh, you're talking really something exciting. 90 plus, man. Should be amazing. Should just knock your socks off. And that's relatively accepted throughout the industry. But we follow similar protocols to evaluate the coffees. And that's what we're going to go over with just really cursory today. All right, so I'm going to get our little setup here. So first thing we're going to need is a cup. Now you can use any type of cup. Typically a nice shallow vessel like this works fine. What we use here is we use at Spro we use these 9-ounce Gibraltar rocks glasses from Libby. Libby is a glass manufacturer, and they make these. These are basically like cocktail tumblers. So you put ice and Coke and rum and whatever you want, or whiskey. And there it is. And it's why do we use this one? Like, you'll see a lot of people in the coffee business, and they have these more bowl-shaped ceramic porcelain cupping cups, and we have those, but I think these are really great because I like to see what's going on. I like that we can see inside the body of the coffee, and so that's why we use these. And these are 9-ounce, and they're relatively the same size as most cupping cups. Like, there's no, when it comes to cupping cups, there's not really a standardization as far as the size. You see a lot of different sizes being used. They're all relatively 9, sometimes 7, sometimes 10, sometimes, hardly, you never see 12s. Like, I've never seen that. But what we're going to do, so you have your vessel, and then you're going to take your coffee. Oh, and today's coffee, let me go grab it. All right, here we go. Today's coffee is the Brazil. It's a Brazilian coffee, the Selma Plus Natural, and this is a coffee that. Here's the coffee itself. You can see that. Uh-oh, what's going on there? Hang on a second. I think I have the green screen running. Okay, let's get rid of that. All right, there we go. So we have, this is the roasted part of the coffee. So this is a coffee sample that I got from an importer called Genuine Origin. And Genuine Origin, if you're not familiar with Genuine Origin and you're a roaster, Genuine Origin is kind of one of the sister companies or subsidiary companies of a very large multinational coffee corporation called Volcafe. And Volcafe started this thing called Genuine Origin, and it's really geared towards, I guess, smaller roasters who would prefer to find ways around shipping LTL, and LTL is less than truckload. And it's just a way of shipping freight where you're not filling the entire tractor trailer of your own product. And so what Genuine Origin does, they take the export bags, which are typically 170 pounds, or 152.32 pounds, which is 70 kilos, and they cut that in half to about 65 pounds, bag them up in 65-pound bags, put them in boxes, and then ship them UPS. So if you're a roaster that wants just some kind of coffees, but you don't want to buy a whole bunch, like you don't want to buy the pallet, it can be a very economical way to go. And it's very convenient because, you know, you can get, and then if you want, you can also buy like as much quantity as they have in stock. But anyway, so I got this as a sample, and actually this is one of the coffees featured in this weekend's video, and where we're cupping. And so it'll be interesting. You can whatever results I'm saying here, we'll see how well do they match to the results that I talk about in the video. All right, so we're taking this coffee. It's a natural process from Brazil, and we don't really know what's going to happen because Brazil just had that big frost, and so there's been a lot of concern about, you know, crop loss and then resulting rising prices. But I haven't paid much attention. I'm not really buying too much Brazil, so it hasn't really been something I've been too worried about. All right, so we're going to take our coffee. We've ground it now to like a nice medium. Let me get that light here for you. There it is. All right. We're going to put that in our glass and just level it out. Now, when it comes to cupping coffee, we're going to add hot water and fill the cup completely to the brim. And what you want to do is you want to do this in one continuous pour while saturating all the grounds. So as you're pouring, you want to saturate all the grounds. You don't want any dry grounds floating. And then we're also going to start our timer and count upwards. All right, so here we go. One continuous pour. And this is really the technique, is when you're like starting out and you're new to coffee and you're joining cuppings and you're trying to learn. This is actually one of the hardest things to get, or it seems like it's hard to get. You come right up to the edge and then stop. To be honest with you, I never really had difficulty doing this, but I see a lot of people do when they start out. Okay, so here's the coffee. As you can see, there's a cap right now floating on top, and then there's some that are kind of floating around or falling down, and there's always going to be some coffees that are falling and floating and falling and floating, but this is part of the process. And so what we're doing here is we are steeping the coffee for 4 minutes, and we wait. And so that's what I forgot to do earlier. What you want to do is, before you add the water, you want to smell the ground dry coffee for the fragrance. Let's see if we can get something off of here. Light coffee, maybe a little bit of cinnamon. And then now, when you have the coffee wet and the steeping part for the 4-minute infusion, now you want to also smell the wet aroma. So fragrance dry, we refer to fragrance as dry, and then we refer to wet smelling as aroma. aroma. So what you want to do is you get your nose really deep, like get in close and really. And if you touch your nose into the top, that's not too bad. So get in there. That's a bit exaggerating. But what you're doing is you're smelling and you're getting, and so I'm kind of got a dry, ouch. There's a dry sensation, kind of light cinnamon, but kind of more of a neutrally coffee kind of thing. So we're waiting for 4 minutes. We're about 2.5 minutes now. Why in the world is it doing that? There's little like notifications on the live stream that tells me what's happening, and like, for example, this is telling me now that we're running on Wi-Fi when the machine is hardwired to the internet, to the network, and who knows? Hopefully you guys can see this. But so now we're just waiting. And so let's just talk about spoons. Now, in the world of coffee cupping, there are what's called cupping spoons. And, here's the thing. Coffee people get really, really freakish about this thing. Like, they're really fetishistic about their cupping spoons. Like, I know guys that have their own cupping spoons, they're engraved with their name and all that, and then they travel around the world with it. They will not go anywhere, and it seems like they will not cup coffee unless they have their spoon. It's quite an interesting thing. Me personally, I don't care. I'll use whatever spoon you have. You give me a teaspoon, I'll use that. Right? It's interesting in that respect. So what is a cupping spoon? So like a cupping spoon, they're generally similar, but let's take this one. And this is pretty much a typical cupping spoon. As you can see, here it is. This is the basic shape. So it's kind of a really steep and deep bowled soup spoon. Like it's, if you're drinking soup with this is pretty substantial for soup. Most soup spoons have a shallower angle as well as a shallower bowl. And for the most part, I use soup spoons most of the time. But I do have a few of these nicer cupping spoons, and so for this demonstration, I thought I'd show it to you, right? Now, you can have ones that have your name engraved on it, like this one's very nice. The guys at, see my name there, the guys at Kettle Coffee here in Baltimore gave me one. That was very nice of them. And then you have like the fancy ones, like this one is, who made this one? This was given to me quite a number of years ago from, oh no, I can no longer read. If you have any questions about coffee or what we're doing and copying and things like that, just feel free to drop them in the comments. This is from Inter-American. And this one is really nice. This one does not have as sharp of an angle. It's got a little bit of a bend here, a bigger bowl, wider and a little bit deeper, right? So if you look here, it's slightly bigger and it's also deeper, right? So you're getting more, more of a sample out of it. And this one is stainless steel, silver plated. And this is these are the kind of spoons that a lot of coffee people, the guys that travel with their cupping spoons, this is what they're traveling with, some kind of silver plated thing, and they're going out there and they're like, I think part of it's just to show off. My Q Beans. Hey, how's it going? We'll definitely get to your question in just a few moments as soon as we get through this. I do have your question from last week to review as well. So don't worry, we will definitely address your questions today. Not a problem. All right, so now we're past 4 minutes, and what we're going to do is break. We're going to use our spoon to break and push the coffee away. And while you're doing that, you're going to inhale deeply. And what you're trying to do is get whatever aromatics may be underneath that cap, and you want to try to get that. And so this one still has general coffee scents. All right, so now we're going to skim the coffee. So there's a bit of like scum on top, right? So we're just gonna use our spoons and skim off whatever's floating on top, any excess grounds. So when you're in large cupping, it's always nice to understand this protocol so that you can help everybody by helping to clean. All right, so we've got that. We're going to set up a rinse cup. Basically, what we want to do is between samples, we want to rinse our spoons to keep them clean. And in normal times before the COVID, when we're doing cupping, we would do this. You'd want to rinse your spoon every time you take a sample. So if you bite or if you taste, rinse, taste, rinse, taste, rinse. Okay, we're gonna let that cool down. So typically we want to wait about 10 minutes from the start time. So we're almost there, but before we start to taste, and this is really just to allow the coffee temperature to fall and come to one that won't scald your palate, right? All right, good. All right, let's get into our questions. So let's start off first with last week's question. Where is the question? Let me pull it up here. It's in the show notes below. Oh, that's not the one. All right, it's in the show notes below from My Cute Beans was asking, can you please talk about safety in roasting? You mentioned about explosion during high degree of heat in roaster. Okay, so why does a coffee machine explode? Okay, so here's the basic scenario. You're roasting coffee and you lose track of what you're doing. You're distracted, something happens, you get pulled away from the roaster, and you're just not paying attention to what's going on for whatever reason. And you come back so typically, let's say you're roasting and you're dumping your coffee out at, I don't know, let's say 215 degrees Celsius. But you lose track of it. And so dark roast, let's say you're at 234 degrees Celsius, right? 35, whatever, 40, maybe if you want to go that high. But then you kind of, whatever happens, you lose control and you just lose focus. And suddenly you come back and the machine is at 280, 260, 300 Celsius or more, right? You're like, oh my gosh, that's way too hot. Your coffee is now basically burning inside the drum. However, typically, and the coffee is probably smoking like crazy. The machine is probably even emitting smoke outside of the barrels. What you want to do is have established procedures for handling this kind of issue. And what I mean by that is, so you want to have everyone understand that's operating that, let's say you get to that point and your coffee is just way too hot. You're like, oh God. The best thing to do is to shut off your flame so that it no longer is adding heat, and then let it go. Just let it run. Try to mitigate what's happening and keep the coffee contained inside the drum. The worst thing you could probably do is try to eject the coffee from the drum when it's super heated like that. I actually made that mistake years ago. And you can do that for controlled purposes for seasoning, like a friend of mine does that. But you really have to know what you're doing, and you really have to be prepared for what could happen. And in the case that can happen, so what happens is that now that coffee is contained inside but before that, the coffee is contained inside your drum, right? And it's rotating, and there's airflow happening through it, but it's superheated, and it just keeps, and it's going to keep increasing in temperature, even though the gas and flame is off, because your drum is heated, the coffee is heated, and just continues to heat, very much like when you're cooking steaks and you pull it increases in temperature for a few more minutes, right? Because it's already got that inherent momentum going on. Now, keep it in the drum and just let it cool down and just wait. And hope that nothing else catches on fire, right? Like, pretty much anytime you have a fire in a coffee roaster, if you've built it correctly, you just kind of want to wait it out, right? Like, for example, if you happen to get a creosote fire in your stack, or let's say, the creosote's probably the worst. And if you're using proper double wall insulated metal exhausting, it should contain it. Like, the worst can happen is that the worst scenario is if you're using like lesser pipe and it burns through, and then now you've got a really heavy risk of burning your facility. And that's really, really extreme. And that can be avoided. But basically, when you're talking about roaster fires, try to keep the coffee contained inside the roaster. Don't open the door. Don't try to eject the coffee, because once you do that, now you're adding outside air, fresh oxygen into this superheated environment, and then it'll just ignite and basically kind of explode. It's typically not an explosion that's going to destroy your roaster. Like, it's not going to blow the front plate off, but it's going to be very startling. It's going to be rather loud. And if your exhaust pieces aren't well assembled, it could blow them apart. I've seen that happen. And then it catches fire. So once the coffee comes out exposed to the air, now it can ignite, and now it ignites, and like, you've got coffee on fire inside the drum, you've got coffee on fire inside your cooling tray. By this point, your chaff collector's probably on fire as well, and it's quite an adventurous moment. So you want to have your firefighting equipment, fire extinguishers handy. Like here in our regulations in Maryland, where we work, for every 1,500 square feet, you have to have one fire extinguisher. And, it's a sizable extinguisher, but, I'm paranoid. Like, sure, we can meet the minimum code with one fire extinguisher, but we actually have three. And a hose. So keep as much firefighting gear nearby. Maybe not so near to the roaster, right? Like, you want to have it a little bit away from the roaster, because if the roaster is on fire, worst case scenario, then you don't want to have to my hose is next to the roaster. Well, it's on fire. I don't want to get that close. So be careful with your placement. And then, when that happens, the smoke is just, it's a crazy, crazy day. And then, even if you don't resort to using fire retardant, materials, like, for example, like a lot of fire extinguishers here for this kind of electrical fires and stuff like that have chemical retardants, right? So you're blowing out essentially chemical powder. And, opposed to a hose, either way, you're still going to have to strip down your roaster after the fire, inspect all the parts, make sure everything's working correctly, make sure none of the wiring has been destroyed or melted, and it's quite an involved thing. So you really don't want to lose track of what you're doing and catch your roaster on fire. But typically you have to plan that it will happen at some time, and you want to be prepared for that. So make sure that if you're not the only one roasting, you have a roasting staff, that they understand all the procedures and everything that you need to do to deal and cope with that. All right, so next question is also from Mike Cupines. Thank you for tuning in. Really appreciate you being here. Can you please talk about roaster machine drum? What is the main difference between cast iron drum and steel drum in final results? Oh, that's a good question. What is that? So, more or less, they're very similar. Okay, and maybe the best way to compare this is basically, let's say, cookware, right? You've got cookware, there's cast iron cookware, and then there's carbon steel cookware. And the carbon steel is basically just carbon steel, basic ferrous metal steel that it just has a different thickness, right? Cast iron is really thick and really holds heat. It holds heat. Cast iron holds heat better, or will hold more heat longer than carbon steel or a basically steel drum. I'm not sure about the properties when it comes to stainless steel drums, because I've actually not really used many of those. The ones that I have played around with are more like the Lorings, but the Lorings aren't drum roasters in the same way that we think about drum roasters. But cast iron, it's one of those things that I think that if you have a nice, thick carbon steel drum, it should be perfectly fine. Like, I don't know if you really need to have cast iron. Like, why do we have cast iron? Why are we cast iron people? And mainly because, we used older roasters, and older roasters like the old UG series from Probat were all cast iron plates, cast iron housings, cast iron drums. That was mainly that was the mode of manufacturing back in the day. But now, more modern times, a lot of people are using carbon steel. And, I've roasted both on UG22s as well as our roaster, and I've also roasted on more modern stuff like the Diedrichs that are both steel drums and IR, infrared-based heat sources. And you know what? You can make great coffee on any of those machines, whether it's steel or cast iron. Cast iron, I think, is really just more of a romanticism of what we're doing. Like, no matter what I may know about coffee roasting, and what I may realize about technology and everything, and like, Coffee Tech makes great roasters, Loring makes great roasters, and all that, there's still a part of me that would love to have a UG22. There's just that romanticism, that like cool factor of that old style cast iron drum roaster from the 1950s. But that's just, that's a romanticism. That's not necessarily based on reality. Like, for example, like with cooking, you could have stainless steel pans, you could have cast iron, you could have carbon steel. And no matter what you have, if you don't know how to cook, or if you have terrible technique, you're not going to make things you're really not going to make anything delicious unless, no matter what you buy, right? You could buy the most expensive pans in the world, but if you don't know how to cook, then who wants to eat what you're serving? So don't get too, I remember you're trying to build a roaster. I wouldn't to worry too much about getting cast iron drums. Get a nice thick carbon steel drum, and that should be perfectly fine. Yeah, I think that's probably the way to go for that. Yeah, because the final results, where's the real challenge in that? And the real challenge is, first of all, in sourcing coffee, right? Like, you're not gonna take a commercial grade coffee and put it into, like, let's say a Loring, which is the one that most of the newer generation of coffee people lust after. You're not going to put a commercial grade coffee in there and then suddenly make it like a 92. That's not going to happen, right? So everything starts with your basic ingredients. So your green coffee is really the most important thing, or one of the most important. It's a super important factor. Like, you can't make anything. You can't make it better. You can kind of mask things and you can kind of hide things, but you really can't improve the basic quality. So buy good quality coffee, and then as you're roasting, that'll just give you an advantage to making great coffee. And also part of that process of figuring out what's great coffee is this whole thing of cupping, tasting coffees, and understanding what you're buying. So that's my advice there. Buy nice coffee. Don't worry too much on whether it's caster or carbon. What you do want to pay attention to if you are building your own and this is a specification that I don't really know. I would have to do some research. But what you should look at is drum thickness will have an effect, and I'm not sure exactly what the ideal drum thickness would be. Like, I've never built a roaster. I've only worked on them and roasted on them, so I don't really know what entails in building them. All right, so we got to do some tasting. So this is our Brazil Salmo Plus Natural. So we're going to take a sample, and then what we do is we're tasting the coffees we want to slurp. And the idea of slurping is kind of like a spray gun, a little sprayer that you use for, like, let's say Windex or something. And the idea is you want to have not a stream, but you want to have the wide setting, right? That's right. And the idea is that you want to coat your palate with the coffee so that all of your sensory nodes get the coffee sensation. Now we are, how many minutes? We're 23 minutes into it, so we're well into this coffee being cool and enough to drink. Now, another thing you're going to find with coffee people is that there are those who are out there and they have these cupping styles where they have very distinct slurping noises. Like, there's one that's kind of bird-like, that's kind of like that. When they're slurping, they get this whistly kind of thing. And I remember one of my friends was doing that, and I was like, dude, it's someone I've known for many years. I said, dude, do you actually practice that? He's like, yeah, I actually practice it. I was like, well, don't do that. You don't look very professional or very cool doing that. Oh, goodness. Number one rule, when cupping and slurping, what is it? Close the esophagus. Close your air pipe. That's now I'm paranoid. Okay, so let's see. There's a really softness to this coffee. A light cacao. Well, more like light milk chocolate, not cacao. For a natural coffee, there's not really any fruitiness to it, but there is there's a light sweetness, overall sweetness to the coffee. It's a pleasant and accessible coffee. I think it's also very soft. It feels very soft on the mouthfeel. Like, there's, some coffees you have a sharper acidity. This one's very soft. Like, it's just soft. It's just soft in the palate. So it's and one of the nice things about this coffee is that it's a very approachable coffee. And typically a lot of Brazilians that I've seen that are more of larger scale production, they tend to be very, very nondescript or not too challenging. So they make great coffees for using as blenders to help create blends, You use this as a component to create whatever you're trying to do, right? So this has some nice milk chocolate notes. It has some softness, kind of light to medium bodied. And you'll use that as a component with something else. And yeah, it's not bad. It's not bad. It's kind of pleasant. It's not terribly challenging. It's not terribly like exciting. Like you're not like, oh man, this is crazy good. This is just good. This is the kind of thing that you could even serve or even roast by itself and then serve it to most people and they're going to enjoy it. It's got a very coffee-esque character to it. So, you know, there's in the world of specialty coffee, we like to talk a lot about these great coffees, and everyone's like, "Oh, wow, blah 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 blah." But really, this is where the truth of the matter is that this is where a lot of coffee companies, you know, make their bread and butter is blend with blends that have really approachable, soft, and easy coffees that aren't terribly challenging to people. Like, you know, most people when they go out to breakfast and they want to have like a coffee with their bagel, bialy, or maybe even omelet and pancakes, they don't necessarily want to be like challenged and have a crazy flavor experience with their coffee and think about, oh, this is grown at like 30,000 meters or whatever it was. And so a lot of what roasting companies do is they get coffees very similar to this, and they'll put them in, blend them with some other things just to give it a twist or round it out more, give it a little bit more distinctiveness. Like this is nice, but I mean, if I was to drink this straight for my own coffee, it's a bit boring. I want something a little bit more. Maybe I'd add a little bit something extra to give it a little bit of a twist, right? To make it a little more depth. So that's kind of what it is. Yeah. All right. Good. So that's a nice coffee. That's the Brazil Salmo Plus. And I got this sample from our friends at Genuine Origin. You know, Jay Caragay has been he's my rep over there, a very good guy. Really good to talk to him every time. Always very helpful. And, you know, it's sometimes what you need it's always good to have relations with importers because they have some kind of coffee that you can work with most every time. So yeah, I always recommend that. I was just recommending that to another roaster just yesterday, where they were asking about something with coffee. And I said, you know, it's about blending, and like, you know, you could do their blending and you do all this, but what's important is, especially for a small roaster starting out, is to develop relationships with coffee importers, because they really can help you. A good importer and a good representative from them can be very instrumental in how you operate and you know, how you put together coffees. They can make suggestions. Once they learn what kind of coffees you're doing, they can make suggestions as far as, you know, coffees that you might consider. I've even had in the years past, I've even had our reps, you know, when I didn't have a sample roaster, they would roast the samples and send them to me, you know. And so you kind of come across an average roast profile for a cupping, which is pretty much just past first crack. And then or you could tell them you want it a little bit farther, whatever you want, and then they'll typically roast it for you. So they can do a lot for you, especially if you're a small roaster. Like, you know, the idea of going out and buying coffee at origin from farmers is super romantic, super romantic. It's a wonderful experience. But the reality is it's not very cost effective unless you're buying container loads. And when you're buying less than container load in country and you're going to multiple countries, that's a bit, as someone that does that, that's crazy. It's crazy. It's a lot of money, and there has to be a really strong reason for it. All right, so that's pretty much those are our questions those are for this week's questions. Let's go and see what people are talking about in the world of coffee. Let's see what's out there. Let's see. All right, let's look here. Let me pull this up. All right, we're going to go back. We're going to the Facebook groups to see what they're asking, what they're talking about. And this one is pour over coffee lovers, and it's a nice little group. I'm relatively new to it. So here's a question from Hiroshi Akiyama: how much coffee do you drink a day? Ooh. Oh, I thought he would put a poll. I was hoping he'd put a poll. That'd be nice. All right. So me personally, maybe one. Really, honestly, unless if I'm drinking for myself, maybe one. Some days not even. Like, did I drink coffee yesterday? I did. I had coffee with my breakfast bagel. And today I'm having the coffee here. But a lot of times I may not drink very much coffee at all. And that's kind of I'm the anomaly in the coffee business. Like, I kind of go along with the Scarface rule of purveying, sponsored by Senor Lopez, who said, don't get high in your own supply, Tony. Don't get high in your own supply. So I tend not to drink too much coffee because, don't get high in your own supply, Tony. All right, so let's see what this get. Mike Twiglet's Prosser asks, I'm new to the Chemex. How do people on here find it? Is it different than a French press or V60? How do I get it right? Oh, how do you get it right? That's the tough one. So our recipe for Chemex is very meticulous. It's so many ounces per 30 seconds, and every 30 seconds, let's say ounce and a half, and then you have to control it. It's Chemex. To get a really great Chemex, I think is very, very difficult. I think it's more difficult than it needs to be. I much prefer to make a 24-ounce Chemex than a 12-ounce Chemex, because the 12-ounce you really need to control the flow and the flow rate, and the 24-ounce Chemex, you can run and gun it a lot harder, so it's a lot more simpler of a brew method. And that was an interesting one to see. Is it different than French press? Absolutely, completely different. Completely different. The biggest difference with Chemex is the filter media. The filter media is pine based, and it's just got a different fabric structure. So the way that it filters the coffee is completely different than anything that Melita or V60 has. And French press, of course, that's completely a different method altogether, where you got a lot more sediment and a lot more oils coming through. Hi, what are people's favorite hand grinders? I'm looking for a very good one. Just buy the Comandante. That's the most expensive, and it's also the most robust, and people seem to love it. Me personally, I don't have one. It's $250, and I don't know. I don't really. If you saw one of the earlier episodes, all the earlier live streams, I'm not a big fan of hand grinding. Javi coffee? No, we haven't tried that. I'm not familiar with that Javi coffee. Oh, Wilfus Svart. Very impressed. Couldn't be happier. Excellent. I'm still very much learning good technique, the language, and developing my palate. So far, I'm thinking that the same beans brewed with the Hoffman method gives a more robust, strong tasting cup, more bitter, compared to the Tetsu method. The Tetsu method gives me a lighter, more fruity cup. So I choose my brew method depending on what I feel like having. Or if I have a lighter roast bean and want to have fruit, I'll use that. That's perfect. Perfect. That's the way you should do it. Oh, look at this guy, Victor Kostrev, somewhere in Europe, but looking beautiful. I wonder what kettle that is. Nice. Oh, Rila Mountain in Bulgaria. There we go. Bulgaria. There we are. And Mustafa El Sayed, he's brewing tea. Looks like tea. Core Gold. All right. Good, good. Let's go to my other group here. Let's see what is happening in Home Espresso Aficionados. These are guys that are really into espresso, of course, at home. Turin DF64. I'm not familiar with the Turin. I haven't used that. I don't really get to use a lot of home gear. That's kind of why I think I'm always interested to read groups like this, because I don't really do the home gear thing. So it's interesting to see what people have to say, and oh, look at this guy with the EK43 showing off. Is this a good deal? Unique E37Z Hero single dose, 16,000. Wow, I didn't know that was that much. I don't think that's a good deal. I think my cost as a distributor is way cheaper than that. I think if I could sell a Hero grinder like that for nearly $17,000, my God, I'd be dancing. New scale to use for weighing espresso output. I've been researching a lot, struggling to find anything under $100, 100 pounds that seems accurate and fit for the purpose. Any suggestions? I think and that's the one thing that I think a lot of people do, and especially when they're newer, they put a lot of, I know I'm guilty of this too. I put a lot of effort into thinking, maybe overthinking what we're doing, because you don't really have experience to fall back on to be like, oh, you don't need to do that. Any specialty coffee shop recommendations in Madrid? Oh, I would like to know that too. Oh, look at that clumping. My Baratza Encore and M2 Burr recalibrated finer grinds and now having issues with clogging. When I can get it to expel the grind, it comes out in chunks. Wow. Wow, that's crazy. Replacing grinder. Oh, here, flavor. Oh, this is the one I was looking for. So this guy Max, as you can see here, is asking a question. Something I've never understood about coffee growing is that generally higher altitude coffee is more sought after. As far as I can tell, the benefit of altitude is simply that lower temperatures slow growth and make a denser bean, allowing for more developed flavors. Why can't coffee just be grown in a slightly colder climate at sea level to produce the same effect? Is there more at play than just temperature? And, the basic, I'm not an agronomist that's super knowledgeable about these kind of things. Essentially, me talking about this is like telling you about epidemiology in today's world. But basically, from my understanding as a coffee buyer, is that why you can't just grow at a slightly colder climate, because really there's not really slightly colder climates. Like there's the tropics and then there's not, right? So once you move into the temperate zones, it's just too cold. Like you could do lower elevation, but lower elevations within a place that it's not going to freeze. So for example, it takes 5 years for a coffee plant to become a viable tree that's producing coffee for production. The question is, if you were to plant lower altitudes in where the regions are cooler to try to get that slower growth phase, you're probably now in temperate zones, which means that there's winters and coffee won't survive the winter. So I don't think that can work. This is I do think this is an interesting question. Maybe what I'll do is I'll try to work on a video for the future where I'm going to ask some guys that I know that are much more knowledgeable about agronomy about this. But I think that's really a fascinating question. What kind of cheap drum roasters do you guys recommend? Oh, here we go. What kind of cheap drum roasters do you recommend? Oh, but this is a home thing. I don't know. There's another one here. Roasters. Did we look at that? Roasters. Oops. Coffee Roasters Forum. Let's see. Oh, how about this one from Maria Busking? Hi, all. Newbie question. Given that green beans available are always changing, I buy small quantities from sites like Sweet Maria's, Happy Mug. How do roasters create a house offering that's consistent? Oh, I think this is the one that I responded to. How do roasters create a house offering, consistent roast that customers depend on when first starting out and not buying in bulk yet? As I start my business, is it okay to have my offerings change based on the green beans available, or is it important to establish a house offering right away? Let's see. What did I actually say? All answers. 14 more answers. So here we go. This is my answer. Have a static offering or change. That really depends on you and how well you're able to sell it to your customers. How do you create a house coffee? First off, decide on a flavor profile that you'll attempt to offer year-round. Next, get out there and taste cup coffees like this. You know the characteristics of your house coffee. Now you just have to find the coffees that make that profile. Or you could just call up Royal Oakland and ask them for their Red Sea blend and use that for your house coffee. And so what Royal, like I said earlier, the Royal Coffee in Oakland, well, there's Royal Coffee New York, Royal Coffee Oakland. They are two separate companies. But Royal Oakland has something called the Red Sea blend. And it's I think Ethiopian, I don't know, it's a blend with Ethiopian and some other stuff. It's actually usually it's quite nice. And you could just buy that, and a lot of people buy that and pass it off as, or, some will label it Red Sea, some will just call it house. You could do things like that. But that seems to be out of stock. Alternative scenario, this is what I talked about earlier. Get to know your import coffee rep. Let them know what you're trying to do. They can be incredibly helpful. A good importer will help you find the coffees to fit your program and help you plan ahead for supply. They can even roast samples for you, so all you have to do is cup the coffees. And I think I really do think that's a nice approach if you want to, all right, let's see here. Oh, here's it. This is, I don't know if we talked about this before. So this is my buddy Marty in Kansas City. Actually, Marty's a really, really great coffee guy, and he's an amazing technical coffee guy. So if you're someone that's really interested in the technical side of coffee, like coffee machine and grinder repair, things like that, and you actually want to learn more about it, contact Marty. He actually has a coffee school in Kansas City where they have where they do trainings. They teach you how to be a coffee technician, and he's probably one of the best resources in, at least in the United States, maybe the world, on coffee machine technology and how to work on it. But so let's see what Marty has to say. Marty says, "Hey, coffee roasters, way back when we first got in the coffee industry, most of our roaster friends had blends that they protected the recipe like it was the actual original Coke recipe. But as the industry matured and most realized that even if you were to somehow get the exact beans from the exact farm, from the exact harvest, that you would still have to roast it exactly the same to even come anywhere close to the same end product. And they started seeing more value in giving to the nowadays more educated computer at least what origins are in the blend. Nobody would ask for a percentage of each. So it has been years since I've heard anyone say they can't tell me what is in their blend until today. So honestly, and with hat in hand and totally interested in everyone's opinions and fully willing to accept that it might be rude to ask what origins are in your blend, what do you as a roaster do? Do you hold blends top secret? Here's the thing, and it's kind of what we talked about in the earlier today with the whole thing about roasting and stuff. From my perspective, we tell whatever's in our blends. You want to know what's in our blend, like we're using what are we using? This week we're using a Nicaraguan washed as well as a Ethiopian natural. And we can talk about that because basically, like Marty is saying here, it's like if you could even get the same coffee, but you're not going to have the same results, just because we're just different. We're just different people, different companies, different approaches. So I'm not one that really worries too much about that. And also, especially when it comes to let's say our single origin coffees. You could go to we print everything on our bags, so you know who the farm is, who the farmer is, what the coffee is, what plot it came from, what the processing, what the varietal is. So you know everything pretty much that we know about the coffee is on our bags or on our website. And so you could ostensibly go there and get the coffee. But I don't really have I don't know why you do that. I mean, yeah, you could. I mean, it's good. We buy beautiful coffee, so I'm not. I mean, but I'm not. I never worry about things like that. Like people are very like protective. Some people are very protective about things like that. Like even in the coffee or in let's say cigar industries like that, they very similar methodologies, very similar origins, and they're very secret about their blends. And it's like there's just so much involved with producing both cigars and coffee before you get to the final product that all the secrecy and hocus pocus just to me doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Oh, here's a question here. My Q Beans is back. What's going on? Sorry, I lost internet connection. Is there any way to contact you direct? Sure, you can contact and direct me. You can DM me at on Facebook. Jay Caragay, jaycaragay.com, yeah, or on Instagram, Own a Coffee. Either way. Also, your two questions from last week about the roaster, the explosions and fires, as well as your question here about the machine difference between drum and steel, carbon and steel. Cast iron and steel. Just watch the replay. The replays are going to be here. I don't get rid of them, and you can watch that. And it has all your questions. And if you have any more questions, send me a DM. Not a problem. Or leave your questions in the comments below, and we'll address them next week on the show. All right, I guess that's good. We're now almost an hour. So thank you very much for tuning in. Really appreciate tuning in. And my Q Beans, thanks for tuning in from out there in the Middle East. I know it's what is it 8-hour difference? So man, it's early. Oh no, it's late. And it's not though. I keep thinking my other live stream is at night, so I'm always thinking, it's kind of late. No, but it's 11 here, so it's not too bad. Maybe 6-7 p.m. for you out there. But thanks for tuning in, and for all of you tuning in, thank you very much. I really appreciate you spending the time with me. And if you're watching the replay, got any questions, drop them in the comments below. Let me know what you're doing. If you want any coffee, please sure to check out sprocoffee.com, SPROcoffee.com. We've got lots of wonderful single origins from farmers that I've been working with for years, and just beautiful stuff. And we're really kind of like one of these more quiet kind of roasters. We're not all about the fanfare, but we just buy nice quality. And we got some new stuff coming out in the fall that I'm really excited about. And so we'll be back again next Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. As always, we'll be here. And so come and check us out again. And got any questions, let me know, and we'll talk about them. But until then, thank you very much for joining us today. Have a great one.